questions regarding the podcast, you can do this at the end of the podcast or throughout the podcast, and I will come back and answer those questions at the end. Okay? We ready to go? We ready to rock and roll? All right, let's get into it, guys. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you are sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. Now, in this episode, I've lost track where we're up to. I think it's about episode 421, I think we're up to. If you are not already subscribed to the podcast and you're in Better Body Academy, help your brother out, right? Get over to Spotify, Apple, Amazon, anywhere you want, and search for Better Body Academy podcasts. There's literally 420 podcast episodes that you can binge listen to. If you're new to the podcast, thank you for lending me your ears. Today, we're going to talk about carbs for busy parents. Should you be eating carbs? What's the lowdown with carbs? So let's get something clear right out of the gate. Carbs are not the enemy. They are not the enemy. They are not the reason your jeans don't fit or you can't get into your fancy shirts anymore. They are not the reason that your belly is hanging over the top of your belt. It's not carbs. It's not the potato. It's the portions and perhaps the timings. So today, I'm going to give you some simple rules for carbs that busy parents can follow. We're going to give you more energy, better workouts, and easier fat loss without sabotage. Does this sound fair? Let's get into it. Let's talk about carbs because these are just one of 3 nutrients that are in your body. It's one of the main nutrients that your body runs on, along with protein and fat. I want you to think of carbs perhaps as your preferred energy source, the preferred fuel source of the body. So when you eat a carbohydrate food, and it's important to know that foods generally aren't purely one macronutrient. When we call a food a carb or a fat or a protein, what we basically mean is that that's the predominant nutrient or macro in that food. So when we talk about a carb food, what we're saying is that food is mostly carbohydrate. And what happens is when that food breaks down, it breaks into glucose, which we colloquially call sugar. So carbs turn into sugar. Now, I should also point out that you can turn protein into sugar. It's not really what we want to do, but protein can also be used as a fuel source. So can fat. Doesn't turn into sugar, but the point is all of the nutrients can be used for energy, and therefore they all contain calories. That doesn't make them bad or good. Just think of it almost like diesel versus unleaded versus leaded. They're all fuel, but different fuel sources. Does this make sense? So they all have a different yield. Now, what happens is your muscles and your brain use this glucose when it's broken down for energy. Make sense? Now, that glucose that isn't used straight away, so obviously when you have a meal, the reason that your blood glucose goes up is because you just ate some carbohydrates. They're getting broken down. They're getting absorbed into your bloodstream so you can actually use them, right? So you're going to get a rise in your blood sugar that's completely normal after a meal. This is why I always worry when these guys are talking about insulin spike. Don't spike your insulin. Look, that's going to happen as a consequence of you eating. Now, let's talk about what happens if you don't use all the blood glucose immediately. What will happen is your muscle and your liver can store that glucose as something called glycogen. Okay, you might have heard of this before. So think of it kind of like this. The food comes into you, it gets broken down by the stomach, absorbed in as glucose, the blood glucose goes up. But if you don't use all that glucose at the one time, we can store that as glycogen so that the next time you need an energy source, right, you can tap into that glycogen. For those of you that played sports as a kid, you know when your mum and dad used to give you a bunch of pasta or pizza on a Friday night before you played on a Saturday? We need to carb load you. The idea is that we are trying to bulk up our muscles and our liver with glycogen so that you could play. Is that necessary? Yes, no, maybe, perhaps. But certainly, this is the reason why carbs are a good fuel source. So let's actually define what a carbohydrate is, because there's no point in having a conversation about carbohydrates if you don't actually know what it is. And I do think that a lot of people don't actually understand what a carbohydrate is. So carbohydrates include rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, oats, fruits. Most of the fruits are carbohydrates, beans, lentils, and even milk. These are examples of carbs that fuel your body. Have a think about those foods, things like potatoes and oats and fruits and beans and milk. Do these sound like unhealthy or bad foods? They're not. They're great carb sources that give your body fuel, and as part of your dieting approach, whether it's to lose weight or fuel performance, they should be included. Then you've got the more processed carbs. So let's talk about these. These are the treat carbs. We're talking about biscuits, cakes, lollies, soft drinks, pastries. Most of the snack food are usually a combination of carbs and fats together. Now, these are fine on occasion, but if what ends up happening is occasion turns into the majority of what you eat, this is when it becomes impossible to get rid of those calories. And people think to themselves, it's the carbs that are the problem, kill the carbs. No, no, no. It's the portions that you're doing and the types of carbs that you're eating. These processed carbs should not be making up the majority of your carb intake. This is where lack of energy and cravings and weight gain start to become a problem. So here's the truth. Carbs don't make you fat. Carbs do not make you fat. Eating too many calories makes you fat. It just depends on where the calories come from. If they're in excess, they will still make you fat, period. Calories are not bad, but if you're taking more energy in than you burn in a day, you put on fat because your body can't just throw the calories out. You know when you go to a service station and you fill up your petrol tank and you put the petrol tank, the hose in, and when it's full, it goes click, 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 and you just cannot physically put in any more? If that was possible in a human, no one would gain fat. But we don't have that click, 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 click thing on our body. So we can put an endless amount of fuel into our body and it gets stored in our fat cells as fat. Okay, let's talk about carbs and the different macros. Think of it like this. Protein keeps you fullest the longest. Fat keeps you satiated and steady. Carbs are the quick energy source. They're also the easiest ones to overeat. And those of you that have ever downed a full packet of Tim Tams in one go know exactly what I'm talking about. This is why bread baskets disappear in seconds and why you can smash an entire family pack of crisps or Tim Tams for you Aussies without blinking. It's that often the carbs are sweet or salted and you just want to keep eating them, right? Low carb diets tend to work for people because they eat more protein as a consequence of eating less carbs. So low carb diets are kind of thought of as the holy grail, but what's happening is when you're eating low carb, you typically eat more protein and less junk food because you're eating. When you think of a high protein diet or a low carb diet, what do you think of? You think of eating more meat, right? And that naturally just forces out the snacky or the junky food. It's not some carb conspiracy. It's that you're reducing your overall calories. So rule one is stop blaming fucking potatoes. It's not potatoes' fault. Let's talk about why carbs actually matter. And here's why you need carbs in the right spots. Carbs fuel strength and power. They fuel strength and power. If you're going into the gym and you're in a calorie deficit, and I know this firsthand right now because I'm going through a cut, and most of you, our clients, you know what we're talking about because you're probably in a cut period, which means you're naturally reducing your carbs. When you do that, your workouts feel flat and often lifeless. And when I mean lifeless, I mean really difficult to get up for. And it's often because you are undercarbed in addition to being underslept, dehydrated, and overtrained. So it's not just the carbs, it's the fact that you're in a calorie deficit, you're not sleeping properly, you're underhydrated, and you're overtrained. Carbs after training help to refill your tank. And that actually is a good thing because it helps also to get the protein into your muscles. So carbs and protein after a meal together is a magic combination. Particularly for our busy parents out there, carbs are literally as cheap as chips. If you think about the most expensive food that you buy, it's typically meat, right? Carbs are cheap. Things like potato and pasta and rice, these things are cheap. So they actually are an affordable way to feed your family and fuel your training. But again, we need to know how to choose the right ones in the right amounts. So for busy mums and dads, carbs are like petrol in a car. If you're choosing the wrong type, the whole thing runs like rubbish. Does this make sense, guys? If you're watching on live, let me know if this makes sense. Now, not all carbs are created equal. Some go down really, really easily. Some feel like a brick in your gut. And I'm betting that you already know which types of carbs kind of feel really heavy for you. And if that's the case, and you have connected that when you eat a certain type of carb, it feels terrible in your gut, then avoid that carb. So as an example, I'd recommend sticking to easily digesting carbs the majority of the time. I used to be a huge advocate of brown rice and black rice. But I've started to just really understand that plain old white rice or jasmine rice is actually just really good. It's really digestible. It doesn't cause people a lot of problems. And as long as you're containing the portion, it's a really, really good way to eat cheaply, have it paired with a protein source. It gives you energy and provides sustenance. The problem with most people is that they take that biggest fucking spoon in their house and start pouring on rice like this and then wonder why they're putting on weight. The portion size is way too big. So things like white rice, sweet potatoes, oats, fruit, rice cakes, potatoes, tortillas, thin wraps, these foods are perfect carb sources, and to put them as part of your meals is completely fine. What trips a lot of people up is bread and pasta. It's not that they're evil, but people often with bread and pasta will feel like their gut's a bit icky. They feel a bit like, oh, heavy and bloated and gassy after it. And if that's you, and you've maybe found that taking those foods out makes you feel better, then take the foods out. Do this on a case-by-case basis based on what you feel is good for you. Now let's talk about when to eat carbs. Carbs at the wrong time can kind of lead to some storage issues, right? It's kind of like when we're sitting on a couch and we're mowing down a packet of chips and cookies, then that's just probably not the right use of carbs. Carbs at the right time help to fuel you. And that's important as a busy parent, and it's important for your kids. If they want to concentrate at school, they need carbs to stay awake. The right types of carbs. Before a workout, we were on the coaching call before, and one of the gents who I believe is watching this, shout out to you, Chriso, he asked about carbs before a workout or food before a workout. Carbs before a workout, a good quality carb is a really, really good idea. for me, piece of fruit before a workout with a protein bar and a coffee, that's a perfect pre-workout meal. 1 to 2 hours prior, that's a really, really good meal. You could always think of something like maybe chicken and rice or yogurt and banana. Something that's not too heavy on your gut is perfect. Now, let's say that you don't like a lot of food in your belly. Is it a good idea to have something like a rice cake with honey or peanut butter? That's not a terrible idea because it's going to give you that quick, easily digestible carb source. And then what you can do is position it so that after a workout, within maybe 2 to 3 hours, you can have a main meal. So what I personally do is I have a very light pre-workout meal, and then after my workout, I come back and have a moderate sized meal that's a combination of protein and carb. Now, that combination helps to boost your recovery because you've gone and made an effort in the gym, and it makes sure that you're not running on fumes for the rest of the day. So I would always recommend pairing your protein with your carbs. Some people ask, should I be eating carbs at night? And they get scared. Some people sleep better with carbs. And if that's you, that's not a problem. If you find that you get bloated at night when you eat certain foods, then avoid those foods and avoid those carbs. It's about understanding your body and understanding what makes you feel the best. When you start to rule out the crappy carbs, the processed carbs, and we start to focus on including more of the carbs that are things like what we've talked about, white rice, fruit, vegetables, these things are really great and actually can help you sleep in some cases. Let's talk about how to match carbs to your activity level. And this is the easiest thing to think about. With protein and fats, we want to pretty much stay consistent with our protein and our fats. But we use carbs as the way to move our calories depending on how active we are. Okay? So let me explain this with just a little bit more clarity. You're going to decide how much energy you need. Now, obviously, it's pretty hard to do this on your own. You would probably need a coach to give you some guidance around where your calories should be based on what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to achieve fat loss or muscle gain? Are you trying to fuel performance? But once we know where your calories want to be, we're going to slot in your protein, we're going to slot in your fat, and whether or not you're in a high activity day, a low activity day, a fat cutting phase or a bulking phase, your protein and your fats are pretty much going to stay the same. Your carbs go up and down based on how active you are or what phase of the transformation you're in. So in other words, if we're on a lower calorie day, we knock the carbs down to reduce the calories. If we're on a higher carb day, it's because we are trying to fuel performance. Does this make sense, guys? So for example, if you have a desk day or you're in a cut, well, you want to eat fewer carbs. Does this make sense? If you're on a desk day or you're in a cut, you want to eat fewer carbs. Let's say it's a workout day or you're in calorie maintenance where your carbs are a bit high, where your calories are a bit higher. Well, you can have a bit more carbs in your diet. You're pulling the lever of the carbs. But if you're going through a big training period or maybe a sport day, maybe you've lost 10, 20 kilos and you're starting to find your activity levels are, oh, I want to be part of life again. You're going to be able to let yourself have more carbs as your calorie requirement goes up. This is what's meant by calorie cycling or carb cycling. You eat more when you move more. You eat less when you move less. Does that make sense, guys? Let me know in the comments if that makes sense. So let's talk about the rule that has saved most of my clients at a certain point in time, and that is to eat your protein first. Here's why. When you eat your protein first, you will naturally eat fewer carbs, or what will happen is you will use the carbs to just top up to where you feel satiated. But if you eat the carbs first on your plate, you'll have no room because you'll be full left for your protein. And now you're missing out on the most important part of your meal. Does this make sense? When you're eating the protein first and then you're putting the carbs on top, we're talking about how you go about eating your protein first. What actually happens is your blood sugar stays steadier, which means that you're going to get fewer cravings and most likely stay in a better mood over the course of the day because you're not getting these kind of blood sugar spikes. So picture this: steak and chips night. Maybe you cook a steak at home and then you're on the barbecue and then you do some air fried sweet potatoes or potatoes. Smash the steak first, eat the steak first, cook it in a good way, don't add too much oil, and then eat some veggies and then have the chips. And if you've got room in your stomach and you still feel like, you know what, my dinner's taken me 15 to 20 minutes to eat and I've still got room and I still feel a little bit hungry, then have the chips. Top up your meal with the chips. But if you're kind of getting to the point where you've got down your protein, you've had some of your fibrous veggies, and then you're kind of like, I don't really need those. Well, what you're doing again, it's not that carbs are bad. It's that you're using carbs to toggle up and down your calories. As we kind of bring this to a close, guys, this has been a pretty deep dive on carbs. One thing we want to get out of the way is don't drink your carbs. This is really important. Liquid calories are sneaky, like calorie landmines. Juices, frappes, healthy smoothies. These are just sugar bombs. They just don't fill you up. You know, my true belief is there is exactly no one that needs to be drinking juices at the same time as they need to be losing weight. Juices are a terrible idea. It blows my mind that in Australia, Boost Juice, and over this side of the world, places like Booster Juice, which are kind of seems like copyright to me, that are just like, these places are so big. And we've got people that are 20, 30, 40 kilos, 50 pounds overweight, thinking that they're doing a good thing, having a juice or a smoothie. If they put that juice into MyFitnessPal and see that it contains fucking 600 calories, they'd be like, oh my God, I had no idea. They are just sugar bombs. Now, the only exception to drinking carbs, drinking juices, having healthy smoothies is if you're someone who needs to put on weight or you're someone with an extremely hectic training schedule. You do not need to be drinking Gatorade or Powerade. These are just extra carbs that you don't need and they're not going to fill you up. If you really love the taste of Gatorade, have the no sugar version and then it's not a problem. But for 99% of busy parents, eat your carbs, don't drink them. Make sense? So let's talk about some eating templates. Let's make this like stupid simple. On a rest day, a non-training day, your carbs are going to be a little bit lower. So you could start with, for example, eggs and yogurt at breakfast. You could have a chicken and salad for lunch, and then dinner could be a protein like a meat with vegetables and a small carb serve, maybe some white rice. So I'm going to say it again. Eggs and yogurt at breakfast, chicken salad for lunch, dinner, steak, some vegetables, and a small handful of rice. That would be a rest day. On a workout day, it's going to be more like higher carb. It's going to be like a banana and a yogurt for breakfast. Then you're going to have a post-workout meal, perhaps of chicken and rice, or after training, you're going to bump the size of the carb up and have a steak and potato, or you're going to have some fruit mixed in as snacks. See, what we're doing is we're using the activity level or the phase of our transformation to determine whether we're going to go higher carb or lower carb. The most important thing when it comes to carbs is measuring them out. You know, a cupped hand is usually a good amount. The issue that most people have is they make a plate of pasta and it's like the entire plate. What you'd be far better to do is shrink the carb source down a little bit and pack on more protein. You've got to control the portion size. So I want to point out one more thing before we wind this up, because from a weight loss perspective, this is very important you understand this, especially if you're my friends in Better Body Academy. For every gram of carbohydrate that you eat, your body will store, when it stores glycogen, it'll store about 3 to 4 times that amount with water. In other words, for every gram of stored carbohydrate as glycogen, it's stored in the liver or the muscles, it'll also retain 3 to 4 grams of water along with it, right? So if you're on, just like kind of try to see if you can work with me through this. If you are on a 2,000 calorie diet with 200 grams of protein and 50 grams of fat, 200 calorie diet, 200 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, you'd be eating about 190 grams of carbohydrate, right? That's how that would work out. So let's say you've eaten at maintenance all week. You've eaten at 2,000 calories all week, and your macros were around 200 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, 190 grams of carbohydrate. All week, you've been about the same amount. And then on Sunday, as a little bit of a treat, you ate an extra half a pizza on Sunday night. So an extra 200 grams of carbohydrate above your maintenance. For some guidance, you would expect that on Monday morning, you will weigh approximately 1 kilo heavier. I'm going to say that again. You're at maintenance all week. Your macros are roughly 200 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat, 190 grams of carbohydrate. You're at about 2,000 calories. So in other words, you're following a really good cut plan for a guy or a maintenance plan for a woman. And then on Sunday, you decide to eat half a pizza. That has about 200 grams of carbohydrate in it. You would expect that the 200 grams of carbohydrate that you ate, plus another 300 to 400 grams of water, you're going to be about 800 grams to a kilo heavier on Monday morning. Now, I'm pointing this out because every time that you guys here in Better Body Academy jump on the scales on a Monday morning and get, like I've just put on weight. You put on weight, you didn't put on fat. You are retaining water because you had a high carb meal and that's being stored with water in your muscles and your liver. So just as you lost the weight quickly at the start of your transformation because you dialed down the amount of processed carbs you're eating, anytime your weight quickly bumps and you feel like you're doing the right thing, it's usually because you've just had an increase in your carb intake. And that's really, really important to know to stop you from like falling off when you think you've done something wrong when you haven't. All you've done is just had some extra carbs above what you've had and you're storing that as water. Does that make sense, guys? So let's wrap this up. Carbs do not make you fat. Overeating calories does. It's not the carbs, it's the total calories. You should pick carbs that your gut likes. So is bread good or bad? It's neither. If it feels bad for you, then don't eat it. If it feels good for you, like it does for me, then eat it as part of your total calories. It's good to move your carbs towards training areas. So if you are training today, then don't be scared to have some carbs either before or shortly after your meal. When you're having them, have the protein first. Always combine it with a protein. So don't just eat a plate of fried rice. Don't just eat a plate of pasta or a pizza on its own. Have the protein and pair it with a smaller portion of carbs, and you've almost got the perfect recovery meal. Do not drink your carbs. It's the worst thing you can do. And lastly, do this, you'll finally have some energy to train, even if you're in a calorie deficit, because you're going to position your carbs around your training. And if we can control that and control the extra calories, you can eat carbs and still be able to lose fat. Guys, hopefully this deep dive has been helpful. You might need to listen to it a couple of times. This has been the Better Body Academy podcast, coming to you with another episode. I hope it's been helpful, and we'll see you in the next. All right, team. That was a mouthful. Hopefully it was helpful. Dale Lucky says, thank you. No, my pleasure. How old am I? I'm 43. 43. Okay, I'm going to go to my client group and see if there's any questions. Hey, Craigie, I saw you all over the place, mate. I hope you're well. Hey, Kaz, I hope you're good. What have we got here? All right, so I'm just going to look at it because our girls love this stuff, right? Good morning, Bede, and good morning, Joe, and good morning, Kath, and Michelle, Karina, Nicole, Amy, what's happening? Miranda's here. Okay, so Miranda asks, any difference between white and brown rice? So when it comes to rice, the major difference between the two, white and brown, is the fiber content is going to be slightly higher in brown rice. And that's because the shell on the outside of the rice hasn't been polished off, right? That's pretty much it. It's not a huge difference. And from a calorie perspective, there's basically no difference. So if I'm really honest, in our meal plan, Miranda, you would see that we still have brown rice in there, but realistically, it just doesn't matter. And it's not even something that's worth like crazily changing. If you feel like white rice is better for you, jasmine rice is better for you, then bang on, go for it. The major difference, the major kind of thing that I wanted to pull out here is that it's not the carbs that you need to be worried about. It's the choice of carbs and the portion of carbs. Yeah. What else have we got? Bonnie says, that was really good. Thank you. This is so helpful. I want to get smarter with my carbs. Look, I'll be the first to say, like straight up, guys, I'll be the first to say, like, it's easy for me to just eliminate carbs and just be like, you know what? Like, I don't need them. And I do that as a way to cut my calories when I'm going through a cut, which is exactly what I've taught you to do in this video. But if you're on a maintenance plan or even on a normal calorie plan, in a calorie deficit, you're still going to be eating probably 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrate a day. What I'm saying is that you should position those carbs around your workouts so that you can fuel those workouts better. Think about it, right? If you are like me, if you train early in the morning, you wake up, you've got no fuel in your body, and then you train, and then the only time you're having carbs is at night, and then you're going to sleep after it, then you're not getting the benefit of that energy source coming to you and fueling the workout. So what you'd be better to do, because you're not going to change when you train, you'd be better to push the carbs to the morning and enjoy having a slightly better energy level in your workout that propels a better session. Does that make sense? No problems, Nick. Hope it was helpful. Kim says, super informative. Thanks so much, Jace, of course. So any questions from the boys? Nothing from the boys. Hello, Bretto. Hello, Ron. Questions from IG. What do we got? It's okay if women go to gym at night. Yeah, of course it's okay if a woman goes to the gym at night. Yeah, 100%. So when's the best time to train? I think in terms of, okay, if I have to train at night, I won't do it. The reason is because I'm too tired. I'm exhausted at the end of the day. But if for you, with your life schedule, training at night is a better fit, then train at night. So the best time to train is when you can train. All right, straight up. How many times a week do we have to go to the gym? If you are not a gym regular, I would suggest start at 2 times a week. And if you can build a habit around 2 times a week, then I think that's a very good idea. Michelle says, makes sense to eat the protein first. I always go for the sweet potato first, but going to change that now. Yeah, because the reality is the protein is the satiating part. In reality, Michelle, this rule or this kind of advice is only really beneficial if you're kind of like eating slowish. If you're the type of person that like sits down at like lunch and just gorges it in 10 minutes, then it really doesn't matter, right? Because you're just gorging it anyway, and you're not actually giving your brain time to hear from your belly to tell you it's full. So it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the distension in your stomach and the hormones in your stomach to tell the brain, I'm satiated. So if you smash your meals down in 5 to 8 minutes, you're probably full, but your brain doesn't know it yet because that loop, that feedback loop is not happening. Does that make sense? So we want that feedback loop to happen. And when we slow down our meals, we give ourselves time to get full. And this is where eating the protein first, this might sound like a very basic piece of advice, but putting the cutlery down in between bites is actually a really good idea. It sort of depends on where you are regarding the kind of experience in the whole weight loss game that you've got. Okay, team, I'm going to love you and leave you there. Hopefully that was helpful. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so. You can get the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the places, and I will see you later on. By the way, guys, we have a coaching call starting in exactly 3 hours from now. If you're listening on and you want to be part of it, 3 hours from now, you're good to go. Come and do it. See you soon. Peace.